Welcome back to Mental Wellness Evolution. I'm Jeff, and thanks for being here. Tonight, we're talking about the importance of having a healthy balance between your masculine and feminine energies, okay? So this is something that is go along a little bit of a more of a spiritual line, but it's also one of the natural laws of the universe, which is the law of gender. And that suggests that every one of us has masculine and feminine energies within us, okay? So the masculine energies within us is like the left brain side of ourselves. This is our thought. This is reason. This is action. This is our, the critical thinking faculties and everything along those lines, okay? And then the right hemisphere of the brain is the emotional brain. This is also the part that's big one about this is it ties us into our intuition. But this is also the part of our brain that gets us in touch with the kindness, the compassion, the care, and those types of things, okay? Now don't get this twisted or anything, guys. I'm not saying that masculine is just men and feminine is just women. Both men and women have masculine and feminine energies within themselves, okay? But we need to have a healthy balance of them. We don't want to be trapped too much in one side and too much in the other all the time. Now, obviously, there might be times when you need to be far more critical in your thinking. When you're analyzing, you're building something at work, you're trying to problem solve, you're coming up with solutions, you're writing a paper or something like that. That aspect of yourself is going to be more in the masculine. But we also want to be able to have that when we can shut that off and then we can go be caring with our partners, be caring with our pets and our friends, and having that compassion for people throughout our lives and our day-to-day lives in the world, okay? So we want to work on having a healthy balance of these things. We don't want to just be all day long stuck in thoughts. And this is where men get trapped really, really bad, is we get stuck in the masculine energy because that's what we're very thought driven, and that's the masculine energy. We're very, very stuck in that aspect of ourselves. We've kind of almost disconnected ourselves from the emotional aspect of ourselves. We don't aren't that great at being in touch with the emotional side of ourselves. It's something that we've been taught to bury, and this is not to point fingers at anything by any stretch of the imagination, guys. We were taught to bury, we were taught to repress. I think my therapist used to say men are only actually allowed to feel two emotions, angry and horny. And I mean, it's in a lot of ways it's actually true. It's kind of what's almost acceptable, especially within within groups of men, as men have this kind of like very thought dominant, like, no, we don't have emotions, you deal with your emotions, you stuff that down, you push it away, I deal like a man. But that's not a healthy way to go about dealing with it. And what that does is it keeps you very, very disconnected from your body, and it keeps you trapped in your thoughts. And we don't want to be stuck in our thoughts, because when we can't handle what's going on inside of us emotionally, we go inside of our heads. And when we can't handle what's going on inside of our heads, that's when the addictive behaviors, and we start turning to things that are trying to get us out of the thought processes. And this is where we end up with the drugs and the alcohol and the pornography and the sex and the gambling and the overeating and the overspending. And it's not a healthy place to live. We need to have that balance. We need to find ways to get back in touch with that emotional aspect side of ourselves. I'm sure you've all seen the yin yang, the two little fishes, one's black, one's white with the little eye. That's the balance. We need to have a balance side. And the same point, guys, we don't want to just be overcome and governed by emotion all the time. We can't just be stuck in our emotions all the time. We can't just be way too overly emotional. It's great to be able to be kind and compassionate and empathetic and types of that when it's necessary, absolutely. But at the end of the day, we still need to have those critical thinking faculties. We still need to have that man strength. We need to have, that provision, those provider mentalities of, and don't just think when you hear like provider, don't just think like monetary things like, provision, safety, providing a container for the feminine to relax into. And that's a big thing with men and women nowadays too, is guys, if you don't have an understanding of how to create a great container for your partner, you're going to have difficulties in your relationships, because real feminine energy relaxes in the presence of strong masculine energy. And if you're very, very hostile, that's what happens to a woman too. Well, she will flip into her masculine and she will get into that thought processes, and that's where we really, really butt heads, okay? That's a very important thing for men in a relationship too, guys, is you need to be able to create that container for the feminine to be in her feminine energy. Now, I'm not suggesting women only belong in the feminine energy either by any stretch of the imagination. A good relationship will be the same thing. There'll be yin and the yang. There will be times where a man needs some emotional support from the divine feminine and vice versa. We kind of work in tandem that way. It's literally how we were designed to be, okay? But we got to work on really getting back in touch with this as men, getting in touch with that feminine aspect of ourselves. And it's not this like, We got to get out of this like whole like alpha toxic male bullshit where it's just like, oh, you puff your chest out, and no, that's not benefiting anybody. And a lot of those guys, when I see them, to be perfectly honest, I just see a scared little child who's afraid of something and has had to put on a front in order to go out into the world and put this face out there that like, oh no, no, you're not. You could use a little bit of help, and if you can get in touch with that aspect of yourself in a safe place. Now I understand this is also challenging, guys. I get it. Most guys I know, if not every guy I know, has tried to express himself emotionally in some way, shape, or form to somebody at some point and has had it thrown in his face for it. So there comes a lot of shame with coming with some of these emotional states as well, where it's like, hey, showing the world, it's almost like, an attack on your masculinity when you have to admit that you need some help, that you can't do this all by yourself. When you start kind of having to reach out for somebody and say, hey, like, I need a little bit of assistance, I need somebody to talk to, I need somebody to get into this and listen to me, it's a very shameful thing for guys. But like, understand, guys, that's a subconscious program that we've just been led to believe that it's shameful to have emotions. And if a lot of guys actually dig into themselves when it comes to expressing their emotional states, they'll realize that they were probably shamed, very likely at a very young age, but even in maybe a past relationship or something like that, where it actually brings up a lot of fear. Because you know what, if you show parts of yourself that you're ashamed about to somebody and they shit all over them, well, you're far more likely to bury that back down, put it back in the shadows, and just say, well, shit, I ain't doing that ever again. So I get it, guys. It's not the easiest thing to do. And that's why I also encourage men to find bros that you can do this type of stuff with you. Now, by no stretch of the imagination am I suggesting that if you're a man, you have issues, you shouldn't express them to your partner. And I understand that in order for it to be healthy, you need to be able to express those things to each other. But I also know that as myself, there's just something that sometimes I want to talk to a guy. Like, I need a man's perspective. I need a man to sit here. And I'm blessed in my life that I have these guys that I can go out and talk to, and we can kind of, get things off my chest free of judgment. And it's a beautiful gift. And I suggest that every guy starts looking to find those types of guys. But that's what we need to bring back more as men, is getting in touch with that feminine aspect of ourselves, which is the emotional brain of ourselves. We can't just be too much of one or too much of the other. We want to be able to, again, find that good balance, find that middle line where, you're a little bit more one and you're, it's not a bad thing to have a little bit of like macho to you at times too, guys. Confidence is a great thing and it's a great masculine trait to have, but we don't want to puff that to the point that it just becomes pure ego, okay? Like, it's good to be confident, but it's also like a confident man who can be soft and sensitive at the appropriate times with his kids and that type of stuff. That's a true masculine man. That's a man who's got a really good balance between his feminine and his masculine energies. And that's what we should all be trying to shoot for as men. Again, we don't want to get stuck in too much of one or too much of the other. But life happens, guys, and there's times when we are emotional. You lose a parent or a family member or a friend. Well, as a man, it's like, I can't imagine what it would not be like to not be able to cry in somebody in a situation like that and not be able to accept some of that feminine love from somebody in that emotional state, okay? Instead, we just bury. The problem is, guys, is if we bury too much, then we get stuck in our thought processes, and the thoughts are what really get us into trouble. When we can't figure out our thinking patterns, I know this for me, I dealt with nothing inside of me. I went inside my head and I drank and did drugs and whatever I could do to try to get out of my head for years and years and years, until the thoughts became so much that I almost had to check out of this reality because I could not deal with the shit that was going on inside of me. That was an imbalance in my masculine feminine energy. And the better I got back at getting safety inside of my body, getting in touch with my emotional states, learning what anger, anxiety, depression, all these things feel like inside of myself, free of judgment, and allowing myself to express them, that's when things start to change. You start to find that good balance where now I have no problem. If I have to go out and be the strong provider, I can do that. But if somebody needs some kindness and some compassion, hey, I can open my arms and offer you that love, that guidance, whatever you need in that aspect or at that moment in time. And I think that's a fairly good balance of it. But I also work very hard on this. It's something that you can do in meditations as well. You can work on balancing those two sides of you. We need both, guys. We need both. The best, most healthy masculine men in the world have a good combination of both of these energies within themselves. So work on balancing them. Again, like, we don't want to be too much of one, too much of the other. Very likely most men, you're going to be a little bit more masculine than feminine. And it goes in like phases, guys. Whatever works for you, but you still want to be able to have the good balance. Like there's never going to be a 50-50. It might be a 30-70, sometimes. Find what works for you, but you have to be able to, we want the critical faculties. We want to be able to think. We need to be strong. We need to be able to provide. We need to do those types of things, but we also need to be able to soften and allow people the space and offer love and kindness and care and compassion when the situations call for it, guys. Okay. So work on balancing your masculine and feminine energies. Have a great night, guys.